Let's dive into the defense, fellas, and this is the side of the ball where I think Notre Dame has the advantage, and I think it's a pretty significant advantage. But you now need to execute and make sure that the on paper advantage and the perceived advantage becomes a practical advantage, and that's really going to be an important part of this game because I don't know that Notre Dame can win this game if the defense takes a step back or doesn't bring it, which we saw a couple of times last year. I mean, that's going to happen, right? Nobody's elite for 12 games in the regular season. You're going to have your off games. And the problem Notre Dame has had is when their defense did take a step back, their offense wasn't good enough to pick them up like the way that the defense would pick up the offense when they had their down games. So the defense is going to have to play to its capabilities in this game, especially early. And it really starts up front. And it's not just because, well, football's won in the trenches, and it's not just because, it's just about this is what this team is about. When this D-line plays well, Ryan, you and I talked about it all year last year. When this D-line plays well, you aren't moving the football on Notre Dame. When the D-line didn't play well, that's when they would get in trouble. You've got a big, massive offensive line that you can't allow to get into a rhythm. You may have potentially 3 new starters for them in this game: center, right guard, right tackle, depending on, who they finally go with at center. Obviously, Mark Naboo started last year. They're talking about the kid from Utah is number 1 on the depth chart this year. You've got the Kansas transfer, Adams Reeds at right guard, and Reuben Father's hurt, so it looks like they're going to go with Crown over at right tackle. At least that's what the depth chart says. So they're going to have their own new set of starters in there as well.
Right.
Can't let them get confidence, Ryan. The front, the Notre Dame front has to dominate the line of scrimmage, which means don't let them run the football. Don't let Connor Wegman get into a rhythm, because if they can force A&M to be in a lot more passing downs, I don't know that they have much of a chance to move the ball and score. But if they stay on schedule, if they stay ahead of it, get into second and short, get into third and shorts, that's where that offense can feast, because now Colin Klein has his whole repertoire, play action, movement, all that stuff, quarterback run, screen game. It's all there for him to go to if you get in those downs, and you've got to get him into pure passing downs, because that's where his offenses have struggled in the past.
Well, I would say this too, is that we've spent so much time, obviously, on the Notre Dame side of things, but even the national side of things, talking about Notre Dame's offensive line and the 6 career starts and Anthony Knapp and all those types of things. People have forgotten that, like, Texas A&M also has a lot of questions on their offensive line as well. I mean, like, we just haven't talked as much about that. Trey Zune is a good player at left tackle, but he might be the only player that is playing the position that he started at last year for the majority of the season, right? Because even Chase Besantis is moving to left guard and from right tackle, where he played mostly as a true freshman. So this is a new offensive line, for lack of a better term. Like, this is a first game in a new alignment of an offensive line, and Notre Dame is bringing back one of the better interior duos in college football with Howard Cross and Riley Mills. They're also bringing in RJ Oben. They also have Jordan Botelho, who's hopefully going to take a nice step. And they also have Boubacar Traore and Joshua Burnham. And this defensive line is one of the best in the country. And Texas A&M offensive line could end up being a solid to good units by the end of the season. I think they have that type of upside, but not game one. Game one, they're going to have the same inconsistencies that we're talking about with Notre Dame, as far as, like, there's going to be some miscommunication at times. Maybe there's going to be some pre-snap stuff. There's going to be some jitters. There's going to be some nerves. Like, that stuff is going to be there for the Texas A&M offensive line. You have a clear advantage up front. Notre Dame needs to take that and make the pundits, the analysts, and everybody out there saying Notre Dame's defensive line should dominate the Texas A&M offensive line. You need to make them right. If Notre Dame's defensive line does not, I don't want to say destroy, if they don't dominate this football game, or at least win handedly against the offensive line, then that's trouble for Notre Dame. That means that Notre Dame probably didn't play a very good football game defensively. So they need to show that their strength is a strength, and that their strength is a strength over the Texas A&M offensive line in this game.
Trevor, I'm going to kick part 2 to you, because this ties into it, and it's something that you and I have talked about. Step number 2 to me in this game kind of involves the line, but also the linebackers. And that is when breaking down Colin Klein. You talked about it in your article today. You and I have chatted about it. He is great at using multiple tight ends, motion shifts, 2 backs, and doing things to create extra spacing, extra gaps, extra what they call surface area, right, in the run game. And then using that where they put 2 tight ends to one side, motion to that side, and they're running away from it, right? You cannot allow yourself to get out leveraged by Texas A&M, and you have to be disciplined. I think that's really the only thing that could prove to be a kryptonite to this front seven is if they are allowed, if they don't handle those things well. So if it just comes down to mano a mano, like Ryan said, I think this Notre Dame D line handles this matchup. And they've played against really big offensive lines before and been fine because they're athletic. That's the concern right there, right? Is don't let Colin Klein do to you what we talked about, what Mike Denbrock needs to do to the Texas A&M defense, which is use motions, use shifts, use personnel to create mistakes or alignment mistakes, assignment mistakes, execution mistakes, whatever, that can then generate the big plays for them.
The majority of my concerns in the front seven live in the linebacking core. And again, not from a skill set perspective. They're longer this year. I believe that they're more athletic this year. But with how complex Colin Klein's offense is, very similar to how complex Mike Denbrock's offense is, especially pre-snap. It's going to be very important that they play assignment correct. To your point, don't get out leveraged. Don't put yourself in a scenario where you're out of position too much. In an ideal world, they play a perfect snap or play a perfect game on every snap, right? But minimize the mistakes and make sure that you don't get out leveraged. That to me is the biggest thing, because once you get into that position, Colin Klein, Connor Wegman, they're going to start getting into a rhythm, which is dangerous, especially being on the road.
Let's dive into point number 3, Ryan, because these all, I think, segue perfectly into each other. What does all of that mean that we just talked about? Defensive line dominating, being gap sound, not letting them out leverage you, not letting them outnumber you, not letting them kind of pin you inside on one of their toss plays or their counter plays or things like that. As I'm watching Colin Klein's offense from last year, run game wise, he's a very creative play caller in the run game. He's very creative when it comes to sneaking out his fullback on a power action into the black and run a corner route for a big play where you're like, how did that guy get that wide open? I mean, that's a lot of their tight end led their team in catches last year, Ryan. I just counted in the 5 or 6 games I broke down, 12, 13 catches at least. That he's catching the ball out of the backfield as almost like he's a fullback or in a wing position.
Kansas State has done that forever, even without him. You
Yep.
remember like the Gronkowski brother that averaged like 20-something yards a catch as like a H-back fullback? Like it didn't make any sense. Yeah.
But it comes down to this, Ryan. It's don't let them get cheap yards. Make them earn everything. No turning guys loose. No missing tackles. If you get a guy in space, bring him down. No, overrunning plays. No turning a guy. You have to make them go on long drives, because if they have to sustain long drives against this defense, they're just not going to score a lot. What A&M is going to need to do is generate big plays, just like Notre Dame. Both offenses are going through a lot of similar things. So if you're Notre Dame, Ryan, make them work. No cheap yards. That's huge in this game.
I mean, because there's only a couple guys in this Texas A&M offense that I would call like guys that can create big plays ultimately, right? Like you got the Cyrus Allen kid. You might have the Terry Bussey kid, who's the true freshman, the 5-star. Other than that, Noah Thomas is a 6'6" outside. I mean, like he can run a double move occasionally, but like he's a possession guy. Like he's going to win a lot of contested catch situations. Ja'Day Walker, 6'4". You have a couple good tight ends, but like, again, you're talking about guys that are more what the impact they create is going to be before the catch and at the catch more than after the catch. Like you just don't have that ton of guys at running back. Le'Veon Moss is a really tough physical runner, but like he's not a game breaker. Like he's not a guy that's going to bust off like a 60-yard run more often than not. So for me, it's like you have an offense that I think is lacking in a lot of big playability, at least from a full spectrum perspective. Can't let him create big plays in this football game, right? Like there's 2 guys that if I'm Notre Dame, I'm really worried about creating big plays on this offense. That's it. And one of the guys, I have no idea how the heck they're going to use him. Like I have no idea what Terry Bussey is going to do on Saturday. 0. So, but those are the only 2 guys I look at, him and Allen, and say like that guy might be able to create a big play on me, might be able to create an explosive. Otherwise, if Benjamin Morrison at some point gets out leveraged for 50-50 ball against Noah Thomas, that's fine, man. Like, it's okay, right? Because the guy's 6'6". I mean, ultimately, but you got to make everything hard and got to make everything difficult. No easy ball, no bad misses in space that let a guy go for 60, no second effort runs. Like, man, keep them what they are ultimately, and that should be a methodically oriented offense that is not an explosive offense on paper.
And I don't know that they can beat Notre Dame that way unless the Notre Dame offense just gives them points. I really don't think that they can. Here's the last piece, Ryan, because I don't think you're going to completely shut this offense down where they don't move the ball, they don't cross midfield. You just completely obliterate them the way that they did teams like Pitt and Wake Forest last year. They're going to have some drives that get into your territory. 2 years ago, Notre Dame had one of the worst red zone defenses in college football. They were only a spot away from having the absolute worst red zone defense. Completely flipped the script last year. They had a top 5 red zone defense. So what they were second, right, in red zone, and then what were they, second or third in red zone touchdown, or the other way around? Easy top 5 red zone defense. And they did it all year. What's the truth, right? Like which one's truer? Is the truth somewhere in the middle? I think that's going to be a big key in this game too, Ryan, because if they do get a couple early drives, as you're getting used to the motions and shifts and the movement and the tempo and all those different things, how they're going to use this guy, how they're going to use this guy. If they do put some drives together, they do hit a couple big plays. Make sure you don't let those big plays result in touchdowns, right? They get a 40-yard gain that flips the field, fine, but hold them to field goals. Red zone defense is going to be huge in this game because when they do put those drives together, you got to hold them to 3. When I look at this game, Trevor, that's going to be a big part of it. Is if it may take them a little bit to get used to what this offense is going to do. There are some players that can hit some big plays. If you do make some mistakes, make sure they don't get to 6. And when they get into the red zone, hold them to field goals. If this becomes a situation where Texas has 5 or 6 scores and they're all field goals, so flipping what? Notre Dame's going to win the game. That's a big, big part of this game, especially early on if they're able to hit a couple plays.
Yeah, continuing their dominance in the red zone is going to be huge. Let's be realistic. As awesome as it would be to say they're not even going to cross the 50-yard line, they're going to. It's just going to happen. So being able to play assignment correct, sound football once they get into your territory, I think is going to be crucial. Notre Dame had a really good red zone defense last year. They return a lot of the key pieces on that defense this year. The interesting thing for me for Notre Dame's defense is almost on the flip side of Ryan's point about how big their receiving core is how they're going to fare in the red zone specifically. I like Benjamin Morrison. He has shown that he can play against bigger receivers in the past. Marvin Harrison Jr. was 6'4", and we all know what he did, a whole lot of nothing against Notre Dame when they went to South Bend. But 6'6" is pretty big, and historically Cam Hart was that guy. Cam Hart was long. He was 6'3", and right now your tallest corner is Leonard Moore, I believe, at 6'2". So going to be interested to see how they handle that. But handling yourself in the red zone, field goals are always going to be wins.
So that's the defensive breakdown, guys. Again, it's a very, very big game for Notre Dame in many, many ways. And when you are playing in this type of big moment, your best has to play at its best. And the best part of Notre Dame is what we know right now is its defense. And so they're going to have to get that. And I think this is also a great momentum builder for this team too. And honestly, this is the side of the ball that I do have the most confidence that will play well, if I'm being honest, because it is so experienced. And because there is so much continuity, this is the one part of both teams. 3 new coordinators out of 4. The only thing that didn't change this last offseason was Notre Dame's defense. And I think that's why I do believe that it is. And what is it, Ryan, that you said? Was it that you said this to me or during the show or when we were talking earlier? Defense travels, right? I mean, then that's got to be true for this game. So that's going to do it for the keys to victory. We'll get into predictions next, folks. But before we do, hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, give us a 5-star review. We'd greatly appreciate that. And as always, make sure that you have signed up at boards.ourspreak.com for our premium membership.